Yeah.
Here we go.
You know, we're all.
You got one life, for crying out loud. You might as well just give it all you got.
The Deej, Dan Jordan.
Your daily dose of reality. Your daily dose of the Deej.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I need my daily dose of the Deej.
I make the news. I don't watch the news. I'm a leader.
The Sales Energizer, Dan Jordan.
Listen, don't worry how to sell, baby. Worry about why people buy. And it's fun.
You don't need a 5-hour energy. All you need is the Sales Energizer.
Just when I think it's not going to be as fun as the one before, each one gets successfully better. What's the word I'm looking for? What's it going to take to get you into this car today, huh?
And now, please welcome the Sales Energizer, Dan Jordan.
Boom!
That's exactly it. Do that. Let's do that. Boom!
Boom!
That's
And I still got the graphic on the screen.
There we go. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Obsessive compulsive perfectionism. That's what speaks to Chris Stone.
OCP?
Oh, yes.
OCP.
Oh, that's it. OCP.
Also a hip-hop group from the 90s. Not really.
OCP?
Yeah. Are you down with OCP? Yeah, you know me.
Oh, that's right. That was that song. Look at that.
Naughty by Nature.
Last week we were talking about punk rock, and now we're talking about...
Oh, damn it, baby.
Yeah, that's rap. You're going to start doing... So, you all set for the holiday? You all set for Memorial Day?
Yes. We had a great show this week with another partner of mine, Lancaster Connects, and they had someone who was discharged from the Army on, really just going through Memorial Day. Because, Dan, a lot of people, they don't understand the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. I know. That's right. It's in the
you
name.
Grew up, well, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people think like, hey, it's a day off and you get to flip burgers, but certainly, and everyone should, right? But everyone should remember, why we have these freedoms to do that, and really just kind of take the time to remember those that have passed and have served our country in doing so. So it was a great show. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. My wife is gone for the weekend. She's taken my son to Nashville to move in, and he has starting a new job very soon there in Nashville, and she'll be coming back on Sunday, so we'll be able to spend Memorial Day. How about you? You got any plans?
Yeah, that's great. Well, my bride and my in-laws are at the lake where your other son goes to school.
Yep.
And I'll be heading there.
Awesome.
Should be later today, but it'll probably be tomorrow. And because it's kind of fun sometimes being alone in your house.
Yeah, I don't know if that's I don't know if we could say this. Well, we're on your show, so I can pretty much say anything. But it's kind of a guy thing. It's one of those things where every once in a while you just need to be alone in your head, but not too long.
Right, not too long, because what happens is after a few days you wind yourself, you're walking around your house naked or in your underwear.
Okay.
Last night, you know what I had for dinner last night because my wife wasn't here?
A Swanson Hungry Man dinner. You asked me.
It was a block of cheese the size of a car battery.
All right.
Just stick with me. They're coming. But that's what happens. What happens is everybody needs guardrails, and everybody needs to be in control of. They need something out there holding them in control. Otherwise, you just go crazy. I can't tell you how many businesses I see that are just like, they're doing well, but they're like out of control. They don't know where the money's going, where their salespeople are going. It's nothing. And every once in a while, you need to meet somebody who's able to rein that stuff in and realize that you could earn like percentages more in profit just by noticing where your money is. And
have you met such a person?
As I was thinking about this, out of nowhere, from the heavens, came someone who has agreed to be our next guest.
Amazing.
As if life couldn't get any better. Here comes, let me introduce to you and to the world, my new best friend, Mr. Brian Marshall.
Yes.
Now, I tell you what, you wouldn't expect from a finance guy. How many people can't get their arms up ready for the for
Oh,
that shot? And here you
They're
nailed
stuck
it.
permanently on a keyboard. That's why.
right. Right. With a
Yes,
calculator in one hand that's so heavy they
that's
can't lift it. Right.
That's right.
right, and they can't get it up. So, look, out of all your Brian, of all your accolades and introductions onto stages worldwide and huge conglomerates of companies, how did my introduction compare to that of those other ones?
It was amazing. I loved it.
Wow.
So it was
That's
really
right.
good. And I like the idea of you eating a block of cheese the size of a car battery also. So that was
That's from Seinfeld, I believe. But he didn't say the size of a car battery. I think he said the size of a steering wheel or something. Was
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seinfeld.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
well, listen, you got to make them your own. When you make them your own, then it's like,
Oh, okay.
swiping is different than stealing. The swipe, you make your little slight changes. So, my friend Brian Marshall, talk to me. What I said about that is not so unheard of. Do you run across companies? I mean, companies that are really running well, everything's good. What percentage of companies that you go into do you find that there actually is some extra juice to squeeze out of that lemon?
Yeah, almost 100%, and I don't focus anything on reducing headcount or getting rid of staff. That is something in my view to be avoided. But there's always little pockets of expenses that people just haven't looked at. They're thinking, hey, this looks normal. We've been, paying these costs for a while now. This bill makes sense. But there's always things you can do, particularly, if your company is growing. It's very easy for those expenses to get out of control, or to say, you know what, I'm going to look at that later. I've got to focus on sales, which is true. You want the operators of the business to focus on sales and delivering to their customers, whatever that may be. But, so you get a nerdy guy like me who likes to get in there and look at all the dollars and cents. And I do the work that other people don't want to do to find all those little hidden pockets of profit leaks.
That's perfectly said. Though you're not nerdy. Let me tell you something.
I am just not nerdy finance stuff.
We've seen nerdy. You are not nerdy. That's where it goes. But I mean, it takes a special person though to be drawn to that type of work where you're in that kind of forensic looking in there. I mean, how did you get into this line? How did you get into this biz?
Well, really, it's because I like helping people out. That's really where it started from. And so, years ago, I was in, it actually didn't start with reducing expenses, but I was in the family business, and I just found that there was so much to be improved. It was a real old school, small family business. The accounting was a checkbook and a box full of receipts that would go to the accountant at the end of the year. This was before I was an accountant. And we had software programs that weren't being used. And I was like, what is wrong with this business? Why does it? Here's what I noticed is that it would go up to a certain level of income, right? We would add some more customers because I was also working on sales. And what would happen is as soon as we crossed, there was like some glass ceiling. As soon as we crossed that threshold, we would lose customers and get back down to that level. And that was not the level that I wanted it to be. So that was really what got me into accounting. I was like, why can't we get past this level of income? I analyzed the business. I figured out why that was and put things in place to solve that so that we turned that company from losing money into making money. In that particular case, the business was so small, there weren't really a lot of expenses that needed to be addressed there. It was really more changing our business strategy, going after new types of customers, changing the way that we would bill to attract new business. And then from there, when it came time to sell that business, I was like, I'd never gotten a college degree. So I was like, I think that this could be valuable. I think there's probably a lot of accountants out there that never ran a business, that never had to, quick run to the bank to make sure that there was enough cash for payroll. And I thought that could be a helpful experience. And that was actually how I got into accounting. And then from there, it was just always trying to figure out, how do we make it better? How do we make it better? Whatever I'm doing, let's make it better. Let's solve these problems.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really important, because people don't have, when people have only, signed the back of the check instead of the front of check, they just don't know that feeling of just having to hustle, hold back some payment to pay something else, and you do kind of crazy stuff to get it done. What type of business was that?
That was a delivery business in New York City with very, very, very small margins, very small margins.
Yeah.
And it was stressful. When I was managing everything in the background, there were times when I was having to look at the bank account every day and figure out how many checks cleared, how many checks still needed to clear, to make absolutely sure that we had enough cash so that nobody was going to, bounce a check. It was stressful. And I could have used help to help me out in that business.
Remember when we used to do things like that? It's like, oh, listen, if I mail it, it'll take a day and a half to mail, and then it'll take 3 days to clear. I could do something else with it. You're playing this game back and forth. Or you ever have to call somebody up and say, don't cash it yet. Give me a couple of days to cash. But now
Absolutely.
I never did that. I was on the receiving side of one of those calls. One of our big customers actually switched accounting systems, I guess. And there's this little code on the bottom of a check that lets the banks know where to draw the cash from. And their new system didn't print that out. So it was like a big check that I got. I deposited it, and then all of a sudden I started bouncing checks because that one customer check hadn't actually cleared in. So that was a feeling that I don't wish on anyone, and having to scramble around to handle that and move money around to get it back in the bank. It was terrible.
Damage control at that point. Yeah.
And so now, when we're on that, payment systems are so much different now, because everything's electronic. And so, things go immediate. However, the banks still make you wait a few days to get your money.
Depending on how it's done, right?
Worse than others. I had a client of mine recently who said, I forget how much it was. It was a large check, and it was coming from a very reputable, Fortune 500 company or something like that. And the bank held his check for way longer than I had ever heard, where he knew that they had that cash. It was over a week, I'm going to say, before they cleared the funds into his account. It caused a lot of stress for him.
Yeah, and they do that obviously because they arbitrage that, and they go back and forth and earn whatever interest rates they can on that money, and so
exactly.
Yeah, it's a big deal now. So now, are you able to? Is that one of what? Maybe here's the question: what's something that a small business can do right away in order just to see if they have some sort of seepage or some leaks in the boat where money's going?
Well, okay. The first thing to do for a really small business is just to take a month of your expenses. You can do it, in QuickBooks or whatever system you're using, or do it over the last, 6 months or whatever period of time, and just really go through and look at every single one of those. So I had a small client recently, for example. He's doing about $1.5 million, $1.6 million in revenue. So it's a business. He's got a lot of customers, but still very small in the grand scheme of things. And even in that small business, if you go through line by line and just look at every single one of those expenses, what is that? It was, this is actually my employee's Amazon Prime membership that we're paying. He didn't know that. He had signed up with some other local business and hadn't realized it had gone on auto pay. And it's like the death by 1,000 cuts. It's a ton of these little small expenses that end up getting put on auto pay. After a few months, it looks usual, so you don't even think to question it. It's not like all of a sudden you have this huge payment. It's something that's relatively normal, but you don't really need it. And so if you're really looking to, fine tune your financial performance, that's the kind of thing you do. Look at everything and figure out if it's something that you're actually using to generate revenue in the business. And if not, see if you can get rid of it.
Yeah. And it's stuff. It's the simple thing. I like that. I like that analogy of death by a thousand cuts. Um, but is it ever one big? So is it ever one big gash? Like that they know what it is, or is it generally always the little stuff that does it?
I mean, on expenses, I would say there's various ways you can get in trouble with expenses. So I can give you some examples that are like
Yeah,
big, like, oh crap moments when you realize that. Um,
yeah,
if you have something like a long-term contract, like there's plenty of vendors out there that have, let's say, 3-year contracts, and um, they might have a specific clause in the fine print that nobody reads because you need this cable service or the internet service or whatever, and there might only be a certain small window where you can say, I choose not to renew this contract. And if you miss that small window, boom, you just incurred another 3 years of expense, even if it's something that you kind of wanted to cut off. You're not able to just say, I'm going to stop paying this. I no longer need this service. So that's, even it can happen with leases. If you have a kind of adversarial relationship with a landlord, there's some leases that will do that will auto renew unless you go out and say, we are not renewing this lease. And who wants to pay, thousands of dollars of rent a month on a property that you don't need anymore?
yeah. You know what I'm thinking is like, who wants to? Not wanting to pay for something that you don't need anymore is slightly worse than going through all those things to find out those things that you're overpaying. But
Right.
only slightly worse because it's a
Only
pain in the rear
slightly.
end. And so a company who's hustling, doing a million, 2 million, whatever, just rocking and rolling, still growing, still very active in the business. You can't necessarily afford a full-time CFO to come in there and do all those things. And if you
Right.
count on, I just had a friend of mine told me that his office manager didn't know it for years. It was a roofing company. The office manager and her boyfriend were in cahoots. They were stealing jobs for years, like
Yep.
$250,000 worth of jobs, because she was the one in charge of that, and she was very trustworthy and all that stuff. He started a separate business on the side, the boyfriend, and,
Yep.
and she was funneling all that stuff there. So
Mm.
somebody can't afford a full-time CFO. Is that where you come in?
That's where I come in, or even for much larger companies that can afford a full-time CFO. A lot of times, if you're in a big expanding company, particularly if it's one that's private equity backed or something like that, my experience with that is the CFOs are constantly in strategy meetings. They're meeting with the CEO, they're meeting with the operations team, they're working with auditors, they're doing board reports, and they also don't have the time to get into that like really granular level of detail on the expenses. So it would either be the case of a large company that would need a special project to improve their performance, or a small business, like you said. I give you another example. Another client of mine, similar size as the other one, like $1.6 million, $2 million in revenue. The company's grown a lot over the years, and all he had in place was a bookkeeper, and that was all he felt that he needed. But he had this question, where's all my cash going? My sales have been going up for years. How come I feel like I never have any cash? So I did this engagement with him where, we went in, and he couldn't afford, he's still a small business. So a typical, CFO on the low end, 150,000, to maybe 250,000. He definitely, could not afford that. But what else can't he afford? He can't afford buying things for his clients. And then because his systems are not perfectly in, he doesn't actually bill the client for that amount. So he should be earning revenue and profit on this inventory item that he has. And instead, he's just sending his cash out the door, giving it to the client essentially for free. So it's just a huge, and he had $600,000 worth of those costs. Now, I'm not saying that he had lost $600,000 on that. That's not true. He had billed most of that stuff out, but without a controller, a CFO in place, if all he had was a $400 or $500 a month bookkeeper, all they're doing is making sure, hey, whatever goes through the bank, it's in the QuickBooks, they're not really doing any additional, level of detail on that. And so that's where I would come in. He definitely, couldn't afford me full time. But it was a really attractive, proposition for him for me to be able to come in and say, look, I just spent an hour with you and I uncovered, $20,000 a year in missed billings that you have. So what if we do this for 5-10 hours a month? How much are we going to uncover? It's going to be way in excess of what you're paying me.
That's so. How does somebody know what's the trigger? And I'm in my business or whatever. What's the trigger that would say, "Hey, man, I just need somebody to come in and check this. I need a Brian Marshall." I was going to use your initials. I was about to use your initials to say I need a BM, but it didn't sound right in my head, and so I said I'm not going to say that out loud.
But you actually just did say that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not that that's awkward or anything.
No. That's nothing I haven't heard before, but thank you. So it would be if you have that question, like, and I've talked to business owners who even have larger businesses doing 12 million in sales, and they're like, I'm actually not sure if I'm making profit or not, because there's the cash basis of accounting, which means you count it as revenue when the cash comes into your account, you count it as an expense when the money leaves your account. There's accrual-based accounting, which is if you send out an invoice to someone, even if you haven't collected it yet, you're booking that as a sale. And, there's all kinds of specifics with, let's say, construction. This particular guy is in one of the construction trades. And he's like, I'm not really even sure if I'm making or losing money. I'm not really sure. So they rely on little shortcuts. Do I have enough cash in my bank to cover the credit card bill? And that's his mental metric. He's got the financial accounting, but if you're having to rely on things like that, just kind of like shortcuts and rules of thumb, like, do I have enough cash to cover my credit cards? It could be a good idea to have someone like me come in and just, sit down, review the books. It could be a one-time thing and say, hey, this is what I found. If you are in that situation where your sales are going up, but you still are constantly squeezed for money and you don't know why, contact someone like me, an expert who can come in, because look, I don't know how to install a roof, right? I don't know how to fix, if you're in an IT company, I can't, do anything with Microsoft. I call somebody else for that. But you know what I can do is I can say, what's this expense? Do you really need this? What customer is this for? And I can, track down ways that you're losing money and hope deliver, a better operating business to the business owner.
Brian, how much of this is damage control versus preemptive? Like how many businesses are actually like looking ahead going, I want to make sure that I don't run into situations, and how many of them are just like, oh crap, like you said, I need someone to come in and do this. I imagine you're adept at both, but I'm just curious how many people are actually preemptively looking at things like this.
Most people, I would say, are not preemptively looking at it, because you're the business owner, especially if you have taken it from nothing to something, when it's very small, every single expense and every single deposit that's coming in, because those are your customers. That's your cell phone. That's your, everything. So that, and you kind of have that idea in your head. As the business expands, it just has a tendency to naturally grow to a point where you can't actually keep track of it anymore, but it might happen so slowly. It's like the old story about the frog in the pot of water that you turn the heat on and it slowly boils and it never jumps out because it doesn't realize. That's the way it is with small growing businesses. They have it under control, and then all of a sudden they look, it's 10 years down the road, and they're like, oh my God, I've got 10 years, and it's small errors. It's, I'll give you another example. Client he was reselling a service to someone, and he didn't realize it, but his vendor that he was buying it from increased their prices. He didn't increase his price to his customer. So this thing that he thought he was making a 20% margin on, all of a sudden he was actually losing 5% on it. And it's just these little small things. It's kind of like, I think a really powerful concept in accounting and finance is compounding interest. And because you can look at it for all kinds of things, right? Very small things If you start them off small, the interest just builds and builds and builds and gives you a great return over time. And sloppy, accounting practices will do the same, but in reverse. So you have one small error with one customer. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe you're losing a couple $100 a month. And then a few months down the road, it creeps in on a second customer, a third, a fourth. And so that's what happens is over years, this problem actually becomes very large, but it's happening slowly enough that it's never like all of a sudden, hey, I made 300,000 last month and this month I lost 200,000. What the hell happened? It's something that happens so slowly that most people don't notice it.
How do you determine the length of time that you would work with someone? Is it dependent upon, I'm sure it depends upon how big the problems are, but typically, what can someone expect in terms of how long they'd be paying you, how long you'd be on the team, that type of deal?
I'd say it depends on the engagement. So, if you want to hire me just as kind of like an external set of eyes and ears, that can be relatively inexpensive. And I would structure that as an ongoing engagement where, hey, instead of paying a CFO 150 or 250,000, pay me $2,500 a month, and I'll do all the work that a CFO would do in your company at a fraction of the cost. And that would just be ongoing. If you have a particular, emergency project, that can be anywhere from a few months to a year. So I can give you another example of that. In 2022, I had this engagement with a private equity company with a roll-up strategy that they had pursued, which is when you take a lot of businesses in the same category, you acquire them all, let's say, at a relatively cheap price because you're buying a small business, and then let's say an individual electronics store. And then over years, now you've built Best Buy. Now you've got stores everywhere, and so that company is much more valuable. Well, what can happen there is the same thing. All those individual acquisitions had all their pricing and all their expense structures with their own individual vendors. And so then over time, you realize you've got this large company, you've expanded by, lots of acquisitions, and you've never just kind of gotten your arms around all of those different vendors. Maybe you're paying 50 different vendors for the same service across your whole company. So that could be, and all those vendors are based on, this individual location was spending $100,000 a year. Well, when you add up the 50, maybe it's $5 million a year. Well, guess what? Now you have a lot more pricing power. Now you can go to all the big vendors and say, I've got $5 million of office expenses, Staples and Office Depot. I'll give it all to you, but you have to give me a really, really good deal. So in a case like that, where it's a project, it's not going to have to be done over and over and over. You do it one time, right. Maybe it's a year, and it takes that time to grind out all the details and, gather all the data, put the RFPs out to different vendors, analyze them, figure everything out. And then it's a whole process of implementing it. Those are for bigger businesses. So I would say smaller businesses could be smaller fees and ongoing, or if it's a specific emergency, it's more of a one-time, thing where we would set the scope at the outset.
Yeah. I got to say, I have a question, but first I have a comment. Man, Brian Marshall, for someone who hasn't been on many podcasts, you're awesome. You got stories left and right. I mean, this is
hey, we don't even ask
engaging.
him questions. I've got examples of this and I've got examples of that. I'm like, well, can we just? I think we just go solo Brian Marshall. Let me just solo him. Right. Here we go. Yep.
That's right.
There you go. Show's yours now. No.
Yeah, we could do that. I'll tell you. No, I won't say it. All right.
See, okay.
I won't say
after
it. After
what you said earlier, by the way, if you do want to say his initials, you could. I see on LinkedIn, and if you're not connected with Brian Marshall on LinkedIn, it is Brian D. Marshall. So you could say BDM, Dan. You could use the full monogram there.
That's it. Well, so BDM, this is you're saying these stories, which is kind of remarkable because usually people with this type of financial background, accounting type of thing have, not that they have no personality, but they less so than yours. Which we're not
known for it. That's
true.
Yeah. But so how do you for the rest of the car buying public is kind of a sales show. How do you utilize those case studies that you have in your previous customers and all that you've done in order to generate new business?
Well, there's marketing materials, so I can put together case studies and say, hey, here's the example, and everything's anonymized. I'm not trying to make anyone look bad and say, hey, I was able to come in and save this company $5 million in 2 years of recurring expenses. So they're going to be $5 million a year more profitable for years and years. But I'll put together case studies. And so, that markets my services and also helps me benchmark. So I know, like, okay, if I've looked at similar companies like this, I know that typically I've been able to save, 20% on uniforms or 10% on utilities, or, there's insurance savings, there's interest rate savings that you can get, credit card fees, all these different things. If I just use them to kind of build a database and figure out who are the reliable vendors that I've dealt with, what are the savings that I have historically achieved, and that's how I use that information.
Well, you're talking about this, and it makes so much sense. Why is it that people don't use you? Like, are there any reasons that you hear that maybe they're embarrassed or what have you? Because
and I'll tell you, there's another thing that I do, a specific business line that I do with a partner, which is specifically for car dealerships. We refinance their debt, and that's like another big one. All car dealerships have massive lines of credit to finance. If you drive past any car dealership and you see hundreds of Lexuses or Audis or Toyotas or whatever sitting on the lot and in the gorgeous showrooms, the car dealership is not out the cash for those. Generally, they're putting that on a big line of credit. It could be easily $10 million for every or more for an individual location. And so what we'll specifically do in that case is, and the interest rates there are based on spread. They're all floating, which means that, when you hear in the news, they talk about the Fed raised the rate and, there's this, that, and the other thing. All those interest rates are based on that kind of base. And then the bank is going to say, okay, we're going to charge you that plus 1 percentage point, 2 percentage points, 3 percentage points. And so what we can do is we go in, we do a competitive process to bid that out through a number of different banks who all want the business. And so we can reduce that spread down. We've had a lot of success reducing it by up to, 65, 70%.
What?
Yeah, 65 or 70%, not the total interest expense, but just the VIG, the kind of spread that the bank is charging.
Sure.
So it can go from a base rate of, I think our best one was, it was over plus 4%, and we got it down to just over plus 1%. So that's almost 75% of kind of the available interest expense that we saved. And so to get back to your question about why wouldn't someone use us, and I think there's a lot of pride. A lot of business owners have a lot of pride because they built that business.
I can see that.
They built it from scratch. And the people that are, in accounting there also, on the one hand, you could look at it on the positive side, like, hey, this is a great opportunity. We can save money. But you can also look at it on the negative side of, oh, crap, I've been costing myself $500,000 a year for 10 years. I don't want the boss to know.
Right.
So
you're exposing
there
people that are already
that
there.
kind of level of I'm embarrassed to admit it. And then there is kind of like the chest thumping, like, we don't think you can do any better than us. So what we offer in that case is a free assessment. We say, you know what? We'll tell you based on our market knowledge, we'll look at your stuff for free. We know what the market is, and we'll tell you this is how much we think we could save, as long as you're willing to provide us the information and let us act on your behalf. And these are the results that we think we can get. And our fees on that, for that particular engagement, they are success fee based. That means if we don't save you anything, you don't pay us anything. We get paid only when you start saving money.
And this is for dealers.
That would be specific for car dealers, truck dealers, anything like that.
Wow, that is special. Now, are these for people that? Because I know there are some big players in that industry for financing, Southeast Toyota or GE, whatever, Capital or whatever they do. Are those the ones? Are you, if people are financed through that? I guess it's the what are they called? The floor plan, right?
The floor plan. It's called the floor plan. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, see, Chris Stone, you didn't realize that I know all this
You pulled
floor
that one
plan.
out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's worth confetti hitting up floor plan.
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know.
there we go.
We need vocabulary is what
Okay.
begets the confetti. So yeah.
How about angular floor mat? Floor plan.
All right.
Not the
Yeah.
floor mat.
You
Okay,
know,
there we
it's
go.
Dan's show. He gets confetti.
It's
That's
confetti,
how that
nice.
works, Brian.
Well, like, before we go any further, so talk to me personally. Wife, kids, family, dogs. What do you got going on?
All the above. So I've been married for, this is my 25th wedding anniversary coming up in just a couple of weeks.
All right,
Wow,
Mazel.
And
that deserves confetti.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, there we go.
There we
ask
go.
my wife to make sure that it
Solar
deserves
confetti.
confetti. And I have 3 kids and 2 dogs.
Oh my gosh! So
That's a
you're not
lot.
cat people. So the boys and girls.
I have 2 girls and a boy. So, and the boy, he likes all the contact sports. So ice hockey, football, lacrosse, that's his. And then in the summer, when his last day of school hits, he'll be out fishing with no shirt and no shoes for days. So
Oh, that's awesome. How old is he?
he's 13.
Oh, good. And the girls are older. I'm glad they're not fishing with no shirts and no shorts and no shoes.
Me too. Me too.
That's a good thing.
Fishing good in the Boston area?
There's lots of little ponds. There's lots of
Yeah.
little ponds around. And, if we go on vacation, like we've been down to the Outer Banks as a favorite vacation spot of
That
ours,
is
or
great.
Hilton Head. And so, yeah, he'll go fishing down there. I mean, he brings the fishing rod everywhere.
Oh,
Nice.
that's great. Fishing. That's. Do you go fishing with him, or is it's his own thing? Because
That's his own thing. Like, I always
Yeah.
found it like a little boring. I like deep sea fishing, but like just sitting there, and maybe it's because I have bad luck or I'm just a bad fisherman. But if I'm just sitting there for hours, like not catching anything, I'm like, dude, there's so many other things I could be doing right now.
that's absolutely right. My daughter was a big. She was our fisherman. She's the one with the luck. She would always throw
Yeah.
a line in and stuff. But in fact, we'll be doing some fishing this weekend too, at the lake house. Catfish. That's all I can ever catch. They have bass and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But all we get is catfish. But we eat.
Yeah,
them.
so
Have you
we're
ever?
going to my parents have a lake house in New Jersey. We're going down there, and the fishing rod is definitely coming with us. And I think he'll catch. He's caught. I think his best. I think he caught like 25 fish in a day at that lake house one time. So
Wow.
yeah, but I mean, he's out there for hours and hours and hours doing it. So
And that is that's something that's I've noticed from a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners and people that get started. It's like the passion for whatever they do. So your passion might be for finance, or it's almost like it's like a little mystery. You're going into a business and say, where's the gold? What's going on right here? And
Right.
people, you'll wake up early for that. So there's kids who are young kids. I remember, notoriously lazy. In the summertime especially, but these kids you'll get up pre-dawn. If you find a good fishing hole that you want to get to at the right time, and so
Absolutely.
that passion drives you to further things. And one of those actually is to build a business to the point where you can exit it and actually sell. And I don't know, do you know the statistics of how many businesses just close down without the ability to sell?
Well, it's a lot. I mean, I've been seeing this on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that recently. So, and I haven't checked these. I don't know if these are just like promotional statistics, but it's something around the order of 10,000 baby boomers a day are retiring, and something like 8 or 10% of them are business owners, and a lot of those businesses they have trouble selling. In fact, not to I have another story about that.
Please.
So we bought an RV during COVID because you couldn't fly anywhere. So we had an RV to just go on trips with the family. We sold it a few months ago. And one of the families that came to look at it was a guy from the Boston area. He's probably in his, I would say, early to mid 60s. And his family had a snowblower sales and repair business in the Boston area for years. It was, I think, his father's or grandparents' business. His brother had been running it. He said it made the whole family wealthy, and they sold it. They tried to sell it in January of this year. Literally could not find anyone to buy the business. He had a bunch of mechanics that would do all the repair work. He had a 30,000 customer list of customers that had been through his doors at some point over the last 40 or 50 years. Nobody wanted to buy it, not even the employees. He shut it down, closed the doors, got nothing for it. The business just went away. And now he owned the real estate. So the family was able to sell the real estate, and they made their money, over time. And that's why the brother was ready to hang it up. He was like, look, I'm, in my 60s. I've made a lot of money. I just don't feel like doing the work anymore. Couldn't find anyone to buy that business and ended up just closing it. So that's my one anecdote, but I've heard of multiple other people that had the same thing. Couldn't find anyone to buy the business and literally just closed it.
So what is it, Mr. Expert CPA and veteran CFO, hotshot? What is it that makes one business have the ability to sell, in your words, versus the ones who are just not attractive for a purchase?
Well, it has to pencil out, right? You have to be relatively sure that you're going to be able to make the money that you need from that business. So, I don't know, maybe people looked at a snowblower business and said, we only had to use our own snowblowers, once a year this past year in Boston, where we used to have lots of snow. Maybe they felt like that whole business is going down, and that they didn't feel like they were going to be able to make their money back. I would just say it has to be something that you can do, or that you feel like you could get people to do. You have to have the risk tolerance of knowing that if you get an SBA loan to buy a business, they're getting a personal guarantee and they're putting a lien on your house. So you have to be real certain that you're not that you're going to be able to make it run and not lose your house. And that
from a seller's point of view, how can I pretty up? Yeah, how do I pretty up my business to make it attractive?
You hire someone like me. I mean, this is exactly, what
I'm trying to set you up here, Brian Marshall. I mean, come on.
I need more softballs, I guess.
Yes. We're at Fenway Park right now.
So ideally, 1 to 2 years before you're thinking you're ready to sell, you would hire someone like me to do kind of the pre-planning, where we would come in and we would say, okay, here's the deal. You've been fine. You're making $1 million a year, but let's make it super attractive to sell. Let's, because when you sell a business, there's this concept of things called add backs. Those are ways that you think the business could make more money because, you're paying for your boat, or you're paying for your private plane's gas, or you're paying your wife on the books of the business, but she doesn't really work, right? These are all things. So when you go to sell the business, you say, well, I know my books say I only made $100,000. But I've really been running these $300,000 of expenses through the business. They're really discretionary. You don't need to keep doing that. So we're going to say this business makes $100,000 plus my $300,000 of add backs makes $400,000. That's how much I'm going to value the business, is based on that $400,000. So there could be a bunch of those hidden add backs in there that you could say, well, our interest rates are too high, to give you the example of the car dealership one that I was speaking about earlier. I know that you can get cheaper interest rates, so we're going to add that back. But a buyer might not want to pay for that, because he's going to say, hey, this is nothing you did. I'm going to have to hustle around to the banks and get this. So you hire someone like me and my team, and we come in and we make those add backs a reality before you sell. So you can say, here's the legit numbers, and this is not pie in the sky. Like, here's the statements. Here are our old interest rates. Here's the new statements. We're adding $100,000 a month in profit. Or,
Okay.
like I said, all the different expense categories. You get your business. It's like staging. When you sell your house, you stage it. You clean out all the clutter. You make it look pretty. Same thing with the business. You clean out all the old cluttered expenses. You put lipstick on it, make it look really nice, and then you get that top value. And
Yeah.
businesses, small businesses, 3 to 4
Well,
times
so,
earnings.
but how do you, obviously, when people are looking to buy a business, they want those 3 forms of proof. They're going to want
Yep.
financial statements, they're going to want income statements, profit and loss, and then they're also going to want to see tax returns. Now, you
Yep.
can pretty up your financial statements and your P&Ls pretty quickly by adding those discretionary earnings back. But is it not? For those people who are, for banks who are looking to lend on that, they're going to hold in higher regard your taxes, which are not going to show that. So how do you overcome that? If not
Well,
waiting for 3 years.
I mean, you can overcome that. I mean, first of all, banks will put some, reliance on your forward-looking items, particularly if you say, here's the W-2. If you back it up in the example I used, if you're paying your wife and she really doesn't do a lot of work in the business, you can say, here's the W-2 that they provided me. This is proof it was an expense of the business. She's not going to be working here going forward. So there are things, that you can do to get the bank comfortable with it. And look, banks have their own metrics. If they know that a certain business typically has a 10% profit margin and it's doing, 2 million in sales, they're going to say, we're going to expect this thing to do about 200,000 in profit. If your add back, if the tax return shows 50,000 and you've got 150,000 of add backs and it gets it up to kind of in that ballpark, they're probably going to look at that. Okay. Now, if you try and say, well, this business that does 2 million in sales in an industry that gets 10% profit, if it's really making $1 million because I've got all these add backs, they're probably going to look at that a little sideways. But as long as you can persuade them and you have kind of the receipts to back it up, here's all the expenses that we're going to cut. Here's the new, here's the old, contracts. Here are the new contracts. Then, you should be able to find a banker that's willing to work with you.
Okay, so it's in essence up to the buyer wanting it badly enough to do that. So that would not work with like a private equity group who is just trying to get it at the cheapest price, and they're not going to do anything like that.
Yes and no. I mean, if you have a legitimate adjustment and a legitimate add back, they are gonna accept that. And because on the flip side, you're not going to sell. If you're the owner and you're like, look, I know I've paid my family $150,000 a year and they don't really work here, and you've got 3 or 4 buyers, and one of them is being a jerk and saying like, well, we're not going to accept that. You're just going to say, okay, have fun. I'll go to the other buyers that are willing to play ball with me.
You see, you're the type of guy that I want to work with. If somebody's thinking about selling their business or buying a business, you're the type of guy they need to talk to. You can explain it in human terms without being all obsequious. Well, I'm
Right.
trying to get confetti. You're without being all high and mighty about it. You can explain it, and it makes sense. Like you're convincing me to do this. So, how long would it take? I understand the dealership just by doing that money thing with the saving them on the interest rates. You could actually increase the value of their dealership.
Right. Significantly.
Really? So, how about? This is actually interesting to me. So, how long does it take? I have an installation company, and I do several $1 million. We install bathrooms. It's kind of a construction thing, but it's that rebath type of thing, and
Right.
we do well. But I'm an owner operator, and I'm taking a lot of juice. I'm playing for my. I'm not showing everything because I'm running it as a Chapter S, and
Right.
I'm trying to get my profits to zero so I could pay less taxes.
Right.
Right. And I've been doing this for 10 years. I want to sell this thing. How quickly can you get me ready to sell?
Very quickly, so in an example like that, it's really just putting together, because I'm not really having to make any operational changes, right? Like, I'm not asking you to change the way you're operating your business. In that case, I would say, look, show me the proof. Show me the statements from your bank on how much you've been paying for your boat. Show me the W-2 for your wife. Tell me, what she does. Let's list all these things out, and we're just going to document it so that we give it, people want things to be easy. So I try to make it easy for them to understand. So I'm not just going to say, oh yeah, I know it says $1 million, but it really makes $2 million. I'm going to say, here's their tax return. It shows $1 million. Here's, all the adjustments. Here's the support. Here's the W-2. Here's all these different, external statements. Don't take my word for it. This is what we said to the IRS. Here's the W-2 for this person. And then I'm going to walk that then through to here's the final. And you're not really going to have a lot to argue with it.
And then do you help?
That's if there's really not operating adjustments.
All right, I'm taking it to the
if
next
it
level.
is, I'll tell you, on bigger companies that I've done this with, it's a slow process. It will easily take a year to implement these things if it's a big company, because it's like turning a big ship. It's not like if I'm in just somebody that's operating out of his house, I change his internet provider. That can be done in a month. If I've got 3,000 employees and I've got to train them all on using a new shipping vendor at 50 different locations, that takes a lot of time to roll out. So that's going to take, a year or two.
Brian Marshall, you're like Mr. Analogy. He just pulls those right out of the sky, like as if they're raining analogies with Brian Marshall.
Your inbox is going to be full of podcast guest requests now, Brian D. Marshall.
Yeah, I think that's okay. So now you've taught us, why somebody needs somebody like you. Mm-hmm. But now's your time to tell me, why do we need you, Brian Marshall, to be the guy to take care of us, the guy or the company to take care of us?
Well, I feel it's my unique blend of experience that I have. There's not a lot of people in my situation who have been a small business owner, kind of like retooled their career to go back into accounting, have been then involved in investing companies, putting together a big roll-up strategy. So, I've been involved in companies doing as little as, 800,000 in sales up to companies doing over 3 billion in sales across a variety of industries. From that, I've developed a lot of contacts in different industries. So if I don't know the particular answer, I have the people that I can reach out to get that answer. Obviously, for most of the last 10 years, I've been heavily focused in automotive, working in the automotive company, working at the investment company, working as an outside consultant to the automotive company. So anything relating to roll-up strategies or automotive in general, I've just got a ton of experience. And it's all, like I said, I am a CPA. I don't do people's taxes. I don't want to be the radar detector where the IRS, are the police. I want to be the guy. I'm not there to just make sure that all the debits and credits match. I'm the guy that's there to make you make more money, because I've been the guy who had to go to my personal bank account and take out $10,000 and deposit it in the business account so that the paychecks didn't bounce. And I don't want you to go through that as a business owner. And I don't feel like there's a ton of advisors out there that have been in that position.
God.
Make more money. You heard that, right? We could just
drop the yeah. So I concur, and I think everybody needs to get involved in that. The one correction, and Chris Stone just caught it there. Only the government makes money. You, Brian Marshall, you earn it.
I find the money.
You business owners, you earn it. That's right. And then the people need to earn it. And I think that's great. And I'm pleased that I was able to earn you as being a guest here today. You were killer. That was awesome. And what about Chris Stone? Is this unbelievable? I told you it was professional. I'll tell you. Doesn't he get it done right?
I don't think he's sure, Dan. I don't know.
I know.
I didn't really get an affirmation.
How do you think Chris Stone did this in this production value of your first podcast?
It's fantastic. Yeah. It's really great.
You see,
and
are you sure, Brian D. Marshall?
Because I'm not positive, so sure you're sure. And I had a good feeling about you from the moment I saw the R2D2 in the back of your studio there. So as a child of the 70s, My wife was born in 1977, and her name is Leah. So you can guess who she was named after. So
Wow.
that
I bet she's quite the princess.
Yes, I bet she
she
is.
is.
And now everybody knows how old she is. And you think
Oh,
you're going to
yeah.
make it, and you think you're going to make it to your next anniversary. Good luck.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Well, I think you're awesome. Oh, look at Jim Fuse. He sounds better than the Deej. Look at that. You're getting
He
accolades.
followed it with a lol, though.
Listen,
You know,
I really
he's just
appreciate
busting
you
your
coming.
chops.
Chris Stone, I can't think, prior to Memorial Day, when I think of how to celebrate this great country and the great men and women who supported it and did everything, I can't think of a better way to spend this last day than with my man Chris Stone. He's an everlasting constant in a changing world. He's the most efficient and consistent human being you'll ever meet. He has skills that keep on growing even when you think they can't get any better, and I really appreciate you. And Brian Marshall, and for all you people watching, I wish nothing but good things to happen to you for the rest of your lives. Eat well, live long, and prosper. Oh, what do you think of that, your little Star Wars thing?
Nice.
And go get them today. Rock on.
Go thank a veteran.